A 45-year-old man comes to his physician for an annual physical. He works a desk job and does not exercise regularly. His BMI is 33 kilograms per meter squared. His blood pressure is 148 over 92 millimeters mercury. Physical examination shows increased abdominal girth. Which of the following conditions does this patient most likely have? Choice A, Ayazi syndrome. Choice B, Cohen syndrome. Choice C, Prader-Willi syndrome. Choice D, metabolic syndrome. Or choice E, binge eating disorder. I'll wait 5 seconds and answer the question. So this should be a really easy question that most of you should get right. If you cannot identify choice D, metabolic syndrome, even from what little I gave you in this question, you might be in a bit of trouble. But let's just go over real quick. The official definition for metabolic syndrome is that you need to fit at least three of the five criteria of abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, hypertriglyceridemia, hyperglycemia, or low HDL cholesterol. Now, in this particular patient, I did make it so that he only meets two of the five criteria. But in this particular case, it's really obvious that choice D is the only good answer choice here. USMLE sometimes likes doing this where they don't give you the exact official criteria for diagnosis, but you just need to be able to infer the correct answer choice, especially for something that is pretty basic like metabolic syndrome. So, as far as metabolic syndrome goes, sometimes in questions they'll also give you stuff like insulin resistance and acanthosis nigricans, which is basically you'll find spots of hyperpigmentation, typically around the neck or the armpit areas. And acanthosis nigricans itself is actually sort of an indicator of insulin resistance. So looking at some of these other answer choices here, you have choices A and B, Ayazi syndrome and Cohen syndrome. These two are rare conditions, incredibly obscure conditions that some of you might have never even heard of. Both of these are conditions associated with obesity in some way, but the real takeaway I want you to have from these two answer choices is that USMLE really likes giving you obscure answer choices sometimes, basically just to confuse you. So, no, I don't think it's important that you know Ayazi syndrome or Cohen syndrome. The main takeaway is that you need to stick to a principle, which is that it's important for you to be confident in what you do know rather than getting distracted by these things where they're presenting you with something that you likely will not know and you don't want to pick some strange answer choice just because it looks foreign to you. Now, in contrast, choice C, Prader-Willi syndrome, this is a high yield condition, but it's pretty much always mentioned in the context of genomic imprinting. So, just as a quick review, Prader-Willi syndrome results from a loss of functions of certain genes on chromosome 15, and it can lead to intellectual disability, hyperphagia, and thus obesity and various behavioral problems. Now, right off the bat, you can kind of exclude Prader-Willi syndrome just because it's a genetic condition. It would be presented at birth. You wouldn't see it in a 45-year-old man presenting for the first time like this. And regardless, the vignette just doesn't really sound like a Prader-Willi syndrome vignette, right? But like I said, what you need to know about Prader-Willi syndrome is that it involves maternal imprinting. So normally for chromosome 15, certain genes are essentially silenced. They're imprinted, methylated, silenced. You can use one of those terms for the maternal chromosome. So essentially what happens is that you're quote unquote reliant on the paternal genes for that particular section. So if there's some kind of disruption to the paternal chromosome 15, in that area, or there is a maternal uniparental disomy at chromosome 15, and therefore you don't have the dad's copy, what will happen is that both chromosomes get silenced for that particular gene because you got both chromosomes from mom. So either way, you were missing the dad gene and you had the imprinting of the mom gene, and that leads to Prader-Willi syndrome. It's important for you to understand that concept for genetics because they just really like testing on imprinting. And obviously, with Prader-Willi syndrome, they always like contrasting it with Angelman syndrome, which is paternal imprinting at chromosome 15. So if you have a disruption to mom's gene, or you have two copies of dad's chromosome 15, it can lead to Angelman syndrome. So once again, quick review: Prader-Willi syndrome, maternal imprinting; Angelman syndrome, Paternal imprinting. So finally, last answer choice here, choice E, binge eating disorder. Now, some of you might argue that binge eating disorder can technically be a right answer because, sure, if you binge eat too much, you'll probably have obesity, but it's just clearly not the best answer choice here, right? I mean, there's nothing else in the question that suggests that this patient has a psychiatric illness, and it doesn't really directly explain his hypertension and central obesity like metabolic syndrome does. So bring it back. Remember that metabolic syndrome is diagnosed when you have at least three of the five criteria: abdominal obesity, high blood pressure, hypertriglyceridemia, hyperglycemia, or low HDL cholesterol. And always remember on USMLE, they really like throwing at you some weird, obscure answer choices sometimes. And usually your best choice is to ignore those unless you can rule out every other answer choice very confidently. I hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you in the next one.